right, welcome back, everyone. We are about to jump into our first SOFA session of the program. This SOFA session is designed to take an in-depth look into subjects via dialogue with their experts. And our first SOFA session looks into supporting regional talent in filmmaking industry. Joining us on stage today are Her Excellency Sheikha Al-Zain Al-Sabah, Chairperson and CEO of National Creative Industries Group, KSCC. And moderating this SOFA session is Rami Yassin, writer, director, and producer. Let's welcome them to the stage.
Your Excellency, Sheikha Al-Zain Al-Sabah, welcome to the World Conference on Creative Economies in this incredible setting of the Dubai Expo.
Thank you.
It couldn't get any better, really.
Absolutely. This is the perfect opportunity to engage and to be engaged, and I'm really honored to be here with you today.
Thank you. So firstly, I'd like to make a confession about a project that you supported that is dear to my heart called America a few years ago. It was Shireen Daibis's first feature film, and since then she actually moved on to direct her second feature film, and then now she's directing for Hollywood and working on projects actually like Ozark, which is a Netflix project, and The Sinner, which are both high profile. So in a way, you kind of supported not only to bring a fish out of water, very engaging story from the region to the world, but you also supported the launch of an Arab filmmaker. So can I say that you've always had a keen interest in the audiovisual world and in doing that, supporting Arabs and Arab art?
I think so, but I think also intrinsically, it just evolved very holistically how things came to be as far as support or alignment, etc. I pretty much just went with my gut. And that's what I usually do. When I find a creator or a story that I'm not co-creating on, at least, there needs to be some synergy there. I need to see myself in some way, shape, or form in the story. And with that synergy then, inshallah, we hope, comes strategy and comes the story as well. And then hopefully also the sale eventually,
yes.
Right? So with Shireen, for instance, that's absolutely what happened. This young woman was starting off in her career. She had directed a short film before then. This is her feature film debut. I read the script in its early stages of development. I could relate to it. It was authentic. It was real. I saw myself in the story. And we took it from there. Maybe many people don't know, but actually we ended up developing it and taking it to the Dubai Film Connection at the time, which was part of DIF. And it was at DFC that we were able to secure a pre-sale, which is very unique for a first-time filmmaker. A pre-sale, it was at the time Showtime Arabia and Rotana picked it up for early distribution. So when Shireen eventually went to camera, we had that peace of mind that there was that buy-in, so she can freely create moving forward from there. So I'm very happy and honored really to be just a small part of that story.
And that's really great to hear because it means that you walked all the steps with the filmmaker as well. It's not just about investing in the filmmaker and lying back and then waiting, but you actually went through all of that steps with them. And then the film premiered in Sundance Film Festival, which was one of the most prestigious, of course, and then won, I think, an award at Dubai International Film Festival. So moving on from there, many of us who grew up in the Gulf and in the Arab world in general, not to kind of reflect on how old we are, but in the 70s and 80s, we were all nurtured on Kuwaiti theater and Kuwaiti television. And to this day, some of these works from that time are considered to be some of the best work that came out of the Arab world. How would you describe the current state of Arab film and TV in general, but also Kuwait in specific as a place that used to be a center really for very original and innovative theater and television?
I mean, I don't think anybody, especially working in TV production in the region, isn't familiar with Darb al-Zalag or Khalti Gmasha or Al-Ghuraba or Ghaira from shows and content in general. But I think to answer your question, I feel like the TV and film industry, not just in Kuwait, but also in the MENA region in general, is very fragmented. it's very preclusive, and it's very opaque. And I think I can't diagnose any industry, whether it's in Kuwait, again, or the MENA region, unless I dig deeper and look at the ecosystem that births this industry, that houses this industry. And I think there are many challenges that need to be addressed. And it's only by looking at these challenges and understanding that we need to remedy them can we understand the benefits of a cohesive media ecosystem. And one of the main things that I see all over the Arab world is the lack of IPR protection, for instance, right? So when we look at creating in this field, or even thinking about braving the waters of creation in this field, I think it's intricate. It's an intricate matter, and it's integral to have IPR protection governance that is unified across the region, not just in Kuwait or in Saudi or in the UAE. It needs to be unified. We cannot live in silos when it comes to IPR. It needs to have a framework, a governance that values integrity, and it values accountability, and it values credibility above all else. That's absolutely a must. And then another thing also is, in parallel, I would like to see rights afforded to creators.
Yes.
Rights and representation, proper rights. Whether it be ATL or BTL talent, we do need to see a standardized system at play here. It elevates the profession, right? It offers credibility, it offers transparency for people working in the industry and people who want to engage people working in this industry.
Absolutely.
And also, I would love to see, I have a huge wish list, by the way, but I'd like to see also the rise of people-first talent and management agencies that value the human above all else and provide incubation and intervention on all fronts and offer scalability, very kind of meritocracy-based scalability for our creators. And also,
don't stop, don't hold back.
With this, I would also like to see, our distribution channels, whether they be streamers or more traditional platforms, really start to engage with these representative bodies. And when I say representative bodies, I mean what we're saying in Western countries, like we need to create guilds, we need to create associations. We need to have those spaces where creatives feel like they were being taken care of, right? Yeah. And so I would like to see our distributors engage very much so with these organizations, these associations. I'd like them to also in parallel engage with the production companies, and I'd like them to engage with the larger grassroots creative community. Ideally, through this engagement, we would be able to see what their content creation plans are, their strategies, and even more so, understand what their selection, development, production pipelines are, and we want to be included in that process as well. So everything is clear. This is where you start, this is where you go.
Yeah.
That's integral, I think, to any sort of healthy ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking, and this is great because you're talking about the fundamental reinvention of the way things are done. And to a large part, we call them the old dinosaurs that controlled the industry for so long. And you're taking away, because there's a need to, not because we just want to, to kind of rise up to the expectations of the new world that we're living in and how things are going, and you're putting a lot more power in the hands of the creative, and you're ensuring that the creative people are protected, or the artists, throughout every step of the process. They say that writing, whether in film, television, or any kind of content, is the most original part of the creative process, and everything else is adapting the written word from the page to the screen. Did you, as a lead into what you're doing now, did you identify, in particular, writing as a weakness in our region?
I mean, yes, absolutely. I have seen development on that front. There's so many incredible incubators, writers incubators, workshops happening all over the MENA region, in places like Egypt, in Lebanon, in Saudi, in the UAE, all over the MENA region. So I'm seeing there is progress on that front. However, it's not fast enough. And it's not aligning with the progress that we're seeing on the digital kind of evolution and production front, right? So we're not meeting that demand. So yes, absolutely. And I feel writing is the key indicator for any sort of success moving forward. I think obviously everything is based on the words on paper, and that's adapted throughout the pipeline, the production, the development, production, post pipeline. It's very rare that I see. And this is arguable, but for me, it's very rare that I see a great finished product if the writing is not great. I don't care what you do in your production, I don't care what you do in your post, I don't care what your budget is. If the writing at its very core isn't great, it'll show, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But if you have fantastic writing, and hopefully not, but the implementation isn't as planned or isn't to par, the writing still comes through. You still feel that the writing is strong, even if the execution is less than that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, and what you're talking about is, and it's a very true point and a very astute point, is that you can scale down a production based on your means, provided that the writing is fantastic and of a great level, because then it's about the content and what's there. However, you can scale up the production as much as you want, but if the writing is not on the page, it'll never be there. And that's, I suppose, where it takes someone like you who goes by instinct as well, and as you mentioned about a movie like America, for example, where you felt yourself there and you knew that the material that you're starting with is really good. Before we talk about specifics, you're the chairman of the National Creative Industries Group in Kuwait. Can you tell us a bit about how it started and what is the big dream?
Again, I always tell my writers, write what you know, right? So this is a field that I knew very well. I studied this field, I worked in this field for years, and after coming back to Kuwait, after working outside in the US and elsewhere, I found that there was a huge gap when it came to a place where I can go and feel heard and be heard as well, or feel heard and hear others as well. And I felt that I wasn't safe in the environments that I was living in at the time. Whether it be I was working with independent production houses, I was working in the diwaniyas that we have in Kuwait and all the grassroots kind of communities that we have, so beautifully built there, honestly. But I felt that I still needed to take space or hold space for myself and for others who needed a little bit more, who needed to think a little bit outside the box, outside the traditional production model at the time, the formula that all the big players were undertaking. And also at the time, I remember, if you were in production, you were working in ads.
Yes.
Right? That's it. You were working in ads, and the lines were very much drawn out. The alliances were very much clear. There were specific production houses that worked with specific ad agencies. خلاص. If you're not part of that
then
circle,
you don't
you're
qualify
out.
here, yeah.
So for months, even years, sometimes we wouldn't have jobs, right? We wouldn't have work to do. And I built a company during this time. I built a small little company. If people are familiar with Kuwait, it was in the Hawali region in Kuwait. Literally as big as the stage. I think the stage is bigger. And we started small. We took a decision from the onset that, خلاص, we're not going to live in this ad eats ad world. That's it. The market was saturated. So where were we going to go from there? And I was willing at the time to really just fail a lot. I was willing to take that risk, but I also understood that I needed to fall forward. It was inevitable that I was going to fall. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But I just wanted to make sure that I fall forward. And so within this falling process, I fell in love again with my first, I re-engaged with my first love, which was film, and I went to school for film. And that's where, America came, and this is where Journey to Mecca came into kind of my sight line. And we started looking at how do we move forward on that front for fiction and nonfiction.
Yes.
And then the call to serve actually came at this time where I was asked to join the government, and it couldn't have come at a better time because I felt a bit disengaged from the larger community in Kuwait and in the region. And what better community to be engaged with than the youth community, which makes up more than 50% of our MENA population, below the age of 25 precisely.
Yes.
And so I had the pleasure of serving as the Undersecretary for the Ministry of State for Youth Affairs for about 6 years. There I learned a lot. I learned a lot because we were working with Arab youth from all around the Arab world through the Arab League and other organizations. And I saw the shared pain points when it came to our stories, when it came to the dissemination of our stories, the telling of our stories, and who had the power to tell our stories. And we needed to reclaim that power. And I felt that, and very much so, when I was working on the ground with the youth community. And one of the things that we did before I actually went to government is when I was asked to join, I said, I just have shart wahid, one little thing that I want to do when I come to the government is, can I take my incubator that I built in my private company and bring it to the government? And they were kind enough to allow me to do that. And I had an incubator called Adasa, which stands for Artists Demanding a Storytelling Association, Adasa. And I took it with me to the government, and there it flourished. Because then we had the support, and we had the resources, and we had that pipeline to be able to nurture filmmakers in Kuwait. And through Adasa, we were able to support hundreds of short films. And that experience in and of itself, then, after when I left government, and left Adasa there, where it still survives and flourishes
still survived
today.
behind.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
I understood very much so that for me to sustain myself in this industry first, and then to allow my industry to scale and grow, I needed to step up. And it couldn't be just a production house that I had.
Yes.
It needed to be something wider. And the scope increased from there. We rebranded. We have National Creative Industries Group today, which I'm very big on acronyms, by the way. So NCIG is absolutely that National Creative Industries Group. However, it stands for NCIG.
Oh, I didn't figure that
yeah,
out.
And I apologize, I have my back to the people here on the left. I apologize. Adruni khwani khati. So stands for NCIG, which in Arabic, for our non-Arab speakers, it means bringing or weaving together different components. And that's essentially what we do, Rami. We try to build those bridges between, first of all, creators themselves, the ones living in the basement, and you know who you are.
Yes.
Living in the basement, and the ones that are above ground and interacting with the larger community. We wanted to make sure that we have all these synergies between them. We wanted to create all these synergies as well between the public, private, and civic sectors, and then ultimately between visual storytellers in the East and in the West. So that's essentially what happened with
What a
NCIG.
dream. Great. In your pledge, and you touched upon that earlier, which I love, and by the way, I downloaded, and anyone here can go log onto NCIG's website, download their pledge, and sign it, which I think is a beautiful commitment for all artists to do. You say no more creative silos, which really is a really vivid way to depict, at least in my opinion, what I think is been a problem of the creative industries here, but across the world as well, because it leads to stagnation. Is this how you see it? Is this why you kind of chose this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think just from a grassroots level, I understood very much so the alienation that comes from being a creator, period.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You feel alienated. Sometimes you feel, or most of the time, you feel rejected. You feel like you have no support. You feel like your voice is not being heard. You feel othered, whatever it may be. And then also on a more, I guess, bottom-down approach or top-down approach, the organizations in charge today feel separated completely from what's happening on the ground. So bringing those things together is intrinsic to any sort of development of CI moving forward.
Beautiful. So NCIG, now that you told me NCIG stands for NCIG, which is great, has a 3-tier approach of incubation, production, and facilitation. I guess it's not really simply a media hub. It's a bit more than that. So do you want to talk to us about that?
I think indeed we do all three. However, we're not a government organization. This is important to note. which is a good thing and a bad thing at the same. But I think I like it better because, yes, we don't have the resources available to government organizations. However, with resources come, as we all know, a bit of restrictions. So we draw out our own plans and we play by our own rules when it comes to incubation, facilitation, and production, which is a fantastic thing. As far as our real estate is concerned, yes, we are a hub. We are a space. We are a studio campus. We provide services.
Well, you need a home to start from.
Absolutely. But I think the way we approach content creators and storytellers is very unique. I think we're very surgical in scope, and we're very strategic in process. And I can argue that also we're very collective in execution. And we do it from the heart. We really just do it from the heart. And it's a very curated process. Again, that's one of the virtues of not belonging to a big organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. So our session is on partnering for talent and elevating the media and communications landscape. And as they say, the proof is in the pudding. And you've recently announced a partnership, which is the first of its kind in the region, with Netflix, who are the pioneers of digital content, really, to train and develop TV writers. So tell us how this partnership came about to be, like what you had to do and how it was formalized and how you kind of secured it.
So the Netflix partnership, again, very holistically happened because I approach it very much like I approach everything else I do with just instinct and with a creator mindset. Because people forget that, yes, I'm this title, chairman and CEO, but I am a creator at the end of the day. That's what I do. I write, and I go through the whole spectrum of emotion that comes with that, right? So that was the approach, and I understood very much so that Netflix was looking to delve into the MENA region and into content creation that is original to this part of the world. And I saw the shared pain points that they had, and they seemed to meet with my shared pain points as well. And we drew out a strategy, a curriculum, etc., that would, inshallah, address those shared pain points. And instead of working in silos, them working on a very top-down approach and us on a very bottom-up approach, we decided to meet in the sweet spot in between. And we created this program that I hope will nurture 6 creators in 6 weeks. It's an intensive program. But it's a big message here that we believe in you, we believe in the stories that you have to tell us. Now let's start to invest in the development process more so.
Great. And what is the A to Z, roughly, how do you select these contestants or these participants? What do they go through in the selection process? And then what happens roughly in these 6 weeks? Like, what is the A to Z of it, if you already have it?
So basically we opened submissions back in, a month ago, November 1st. We opened submissions, and as it's a pilot program, so we're starting off now with Lab 6 creators in 6 weeks. What we hope to do essentially is through the selection process, because we closed selections last week, December 1st we closed, so it was a month of selections. We opened the first phase, this edition of Lab 6, to Kuwait and Saudi-based creators as a first step.
Yes.
I would have loved to open it for the rest of the MENA region, but given the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic still, not knowing what it would look like once we launched. Second of all, because we wanted to take the pulse and understand where we stood as far as writing and need for writing from people that perhaps find that organizations like Netflix are inaccessible or too highbrow or hard to reach. We wanted to understand what was out there. So we started with Kuwait and Saudi. Creators do not need to be from Kuwait and do not need to be from Saudi. They just need to be residents.
Residents, that's fantastic.
Of Kuwait or Saudi. And we opened the selection process. We have a list of criteria. They have to be, for instance, 18 years of age plus. They need to have an idea in the early stages of conceptualization or development. They need to own the IP to this idea. And if they don't, for some reason, they need to make sure that they're not infringing on any other third party's IP. They need to respect kind of all the ethical codes that we have put in place. And one of the major ones for me is that you hold space for the creators that are going to be with you in the program, and you don't, away from judgment and away from any sort of. And then also, we want to make sure that all our storytellers, our creators, our writers are independent and are not attached to a director or producer, and I'll tell you why in a bit.
Okay.
But so once they submit to this program, and everything was online, and inshallah, once the 6 creators are selected, and the selection process is going to be taking place between, NCIG and Netflix and our mentors. They're going to be in Kuwait, inshallah, on the ground at NCIG Studios for 6 weeks intensively. Each week we have embedded craft-driven interventions into the way they're going to develop their ideas. We have we're going to be separating our creators into 2 writers' rooms. Each room is going to be led by a best-in-class showrunner and script consultant. Each creator does have his or her own project. However, we want them to be part of a collaborative process where they address or they, discuss their ideas back and forth with other creators. We have NIFA, the New York Film Academy, with us for week 1. So they're going to be on the ground in Kuwait, training the 6 creators and providing a toolbox kit or workshop for them so that they can all take off on the same ground for the remaining weeks. And then throughout the duration of the program, they're going to be developing their show ideas into fully fledged pitch decks and Bibles. We're going to have virtual masterclass interventions throughout the process by industry professionals. Netflix is going to give a virtual masterclass. And then we have Maryam Naoum from Masr. We have Hisham Faqih from Saudi. And we have Muna Shimri from Kuwait. So all these interventions are going to come into play once the creatives are ready, or the creators are ready to pitch, inshallah, by the end of week 6. And this is where, for me, it gets super interesting because they get the opportunity to pitch their ideas directly to Netflix, and Netflix has the first right of refusal on their project. So they have that access, uncumbered access to Netflix.
And safe also.
Completely safe.
Safe after 6 weeks.
Protected, etc. And the best part is, Rami, and this is, I have to thank Netflix really for stepping up and making this happen, especially the Grow creative initiative led by Chris Mack. They are allowing our creators, and this is something that we pushed for, but it was an easy decision on their part to take Netflix, and that shows their commitment, honestly, to the larger community. If a creator, the 6 creators, one of them or any of them, do not get chosen to go on to the second round with Netflix, because then they go on to develop and produce their ideas with Netflix, then they completely own their IP. They take it back completely.
With them.
Completely, the whole package.
That's great.
So everything they've developed over the 6 weeks, they completely own, and they can take it anywhere they want.
Yeah, which is fantastic, because it might not be right for Netflix, but that doesn't mean it's not right for somewhere else as well.
Right.
That's really great.
However, if Netflix does choose to pick up your project to option further for development or production, then Netflix will provide you with a development fee, and they will provide you with a writer's room and any international talent that you see fit to take it
Excellent.
forward.
So you're talking about the new model of creating television as well, whereby the writer is actually the key person, not the director, because the writers are the showrunners. They control the creative process, and then you get them a team of other writers, and then which is very strange for our region, obviously, as we know. So that's how also going forward, which is what I wanted to get to, is how projects will get produced that get chosen.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
There's no other way to go about it, in my opinion.
Yeah. So one of the key themes of the World Conference on Creative Economy, and indeed Expo actually, is sustainability. So what happens once, you've told us a little bit what happens after the 6 weeks are over. What other ways have you looked at, or are you looking at, to make sure that this is a sustainable and continuous program that might either grow more writers or grow into something?
I think, again, this is a pilot program. Inshallah, we can scale and move forward from there. However, I think, and I hope, I pray actually, that a program like this will inspire other organizations, production communities, hubs, you name it, to build similar alliances with other streamers, global streamers from around the world. So it's not just us working in this field. I would love to see a mushrooming effect take place all over the Arab world. This is one, and that will absolutely drive us forward as a community and as an ecosystem, but also just the energy that a program like Lab 66 has generated is phenomenal. Even if you don't make it into the first cut or the first round of whatever it is, right? Or if you're not one of the 6, just the process of applying to Lab 66 will give you the mechanics that you need to understand what the materials that you need.
You should have before you knock on the door.
Absolutely. So that process in and of itself, inshallah, will be very kind of knowledge-based and allow people to understand very much so.
And based on an industry standard of what any other kind of studio. So do you have an idea, and are you allowed to say like how many applied?
I cannot disclose as of yet, but we will soon, inshallah.
Okay, but you look very happy with it.
I'm ecstatic, actually. The numbers have exceeded my expectations, and you know we're counting as we speak, and we're looking at the first round as we speak.
You mentioned that you'd also like to see sort of this kind of program mushroom, either with other streamers, by other companies in the region, but also maybe collaboration. And I'd like to bring up the example of the UAE and Abu Dhabi, where I'm sure you know Imagination Abu Dhabi that have been around for many years, but in the last 10 years, they started a program, really also grassroots, of saying like, we now want to make Arabic cinema. And they started making Arabic cinema. And 10 years later, there's at least 8 movies produced by some of them existing directors from the region, but sometimes some of them first-timers like Majd Al-Ansari, who did Zanzana, Shahd Al-Amin from Saudi Arabia, who did Scales, Yasser Al-Yasseri from Iraq, who did Shabab Shiyab. And some of these have gone to like Venice, and some of them have gone there. Actually, Zanzana by Majd Al-Ansari was the first, I think, Arabic film that Netflix ever bought.
Yeah.
So they have actually also opened avenues for emerging filmmakers. And the reason why that came to my mind is, again, because of one of the sessions that I heard yesterday, and which we'll talk about now, is that you don't only need to support artists by making their work, artists need, especially emerging one, help through every step of the way, including sometimes in the creative application of their work. But what they also need at the end of the day is to make a living and earn money. And one of the things that Imagination did is that if we're going to bring those people in the industry, we need to make sure that they have jobs after the movie. So they would rotate. Someone that was directing a movie becomes a consulting creative director on another movie. A person that directed becomes a consulting producer, and shift. And this way, they managed to actually give them not the best, maybe, livelihood to buy a Mercedes, but actually enough money to survive a year. And that was touched upon in one of yesterday's sessions. How do you see this evolving, this kind of switch from supporting talent and getting creative work made, but making sure that the talents are basically getting paid and getting paid enough, and that there's continuity in there?
Yeah, so again, I go back to the representation and the rights, the lack thereof situation for ATL and BTL talent in our part of the world. And this is if we want to have a sustained and viable kind of outlook on how to deal with talent and how to make sure that they're taken care of, then we cannot do that effectively if there is no standardized system that absolutely guarantees that their rights are met, that their wages are fair, right? And that they're represented on all fronts. And that absolutely is necessary. And I think one of the major things that we need to look at today is, for instance, a lot of our creators complain that they spent months or even sometimes years developing a project for a network and they don't get paid, right? That for me
a lot of them complain about that. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely, and that is, again, that would be part of the representation scheme where, listen.
Okay, yeah.
So this creator has been in development on a project for a specific network or for a specific streamer, and they're not being compensated. We need a system of, first of all, of compensation and then of meritocracy as well, right? So both come hand in hand. But I think to allow our creators to kind of just wing it and have no sort of nets to support them isn't viable, and it's not human either. It's
Not
just
human
not human.
as, yes,
right?
absolutely.
So at the end of the day, for streamers to survive, for networks to survive, they need to understand the value of a writer, the value of a creator, and give him or her the right that she deserves. Invest fully, completely in the development process. And hey, if your project doesn't get greenlit into production, it's fine. At least there's been IP that's been developed, and then you can decide with the creator directly if the IP is owned by the creator or the network will take over that IP and develop it elsewhere.
With someone else.
It's fine,
absolutely.
but at least you have, inshallah, the time value of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's no longer show me the goods and then I'll tell you if I like it.
No.
It's like you've begun. I guess that's what you're talking about, having a structured way of what you start with. At this stage, they write maybe the treatment first, you like it, you pay for that, then you go to the pilot, and there's a step-by-steps whereby there's some kind of protection. And you mentioned the word risk, of course, and there's always a risk, but the risk shouldn't be on the shoulder of the artist themselves. It should be a shared risk, and people should know from the beginning, I guess, is what you're saying, that that's what they're going into. So we've spoken a lot about what you do and what the industry has to do, and. Is there something that the artists in your mind also, responsibility lies on both. Is there something that the artists have been guilty of that you can advise them on and that they need to change? Either it's a mindset or the way they do things.
Yeah, I think, this industry isn't easy. To live and work in this industry, it's not an easy industry. Again, it comes with a lot of rejection. It comes with a lot of, unfortunately, in some cases, ego that you have to deal with, right? But also, I think you need to always make sure to step back about 25 notches and look deeply into what stories you want to tell, because that's going to be your catalyst moving forward. I think for us in the Middle East, we're actually very super lucky, because there hasn't been a better time to be a content creator ever in the history of content creation.
Completely.
Right? Especially in the Middle East.
And especially after the pandemic.
Especially after the pandemic, and especially in the Middle East, because it's untapped.
Absolutely.
It's completely untapped. So they need to understand, our creators, our content creators, our showrunners, script consultants, everybody working in this kind of realm need to understand that this is right now, there's a gold mine of opportunity waiting for them. They just need to understand the type of content, again, they want to be making, the type of distribution platforms they want to be working with, and the partnerships that they want to have. Because then it's limitless.
Yes.
The opportunities are limitless.
Yes.
But I would also like to add here that we've always thought that you're one of either school. Either you feel like content is king, or you feel that data is king. As an artist, usually you feel like content is king, that my story is important. I will create the market by telling the story, rather than the opposite, where you think that data is the king. And I think there's a sweet spot that lives very much in between both kingdoms. I think that creators moving forward need to know how to penetrate that kingdom,
Yes.
how to live in that kingdom.
Yes.
You need to be able to forecast what's going to be popular in the next 2, 3, 5 years. You need to write for that according to that forecast, but also stay true to what your passion and what your vision is for your type of story or whatever you. Yeah. So this is important. I think we need to live in that.
Yeah, very true. I was recently collaborating with the Sharjah Art Foundation on their film program, where they also have they bring in, they choose artists with the projects, they put them through a writing workshop, and then like a pitching course, and then they pitch, and they get an award, which is like a start that helps them kickstart production in some ways. And in one of the presentations, one of the participants was saying, and this will be different than any other movie ever made, and it will attract different kind of audience than any other movie made, and different than. And I said, listen, with all due respect, there are thousands of filmmakers out there in the world. Let me tell you, you are not going to make anything different. You as an artist need to have the humility and humility to say, I hope my work will break through and attract a certain kind of audience because of 1, 2, and 3, and justify these. There's this thing that artists fall into. This hole is that just because of who I am, my work is going to be different, and we all know that that doesn't work like that. And it's good to have someone to kind of, demystify all of these things about the world and how the world works. So we've seen, obviously, on Netflix and now through your collaboration, obviously they are increasing their buying of a lot of Arab content. They recently curated a list of 35 Palestinian short and long movies and documentaries. They have works from the Gulf, from Kuwait, and from Egypt, and from actually Abu Dhabi as well, the courtroom drama. But there's also a lot of work that we know, even though Netflix hold data dear to their hearts and they never tell you who's watching what. Yeah. But we know things like Dark from Germany, for example, is a worldwide success. Squid Game is a worldwide success. And many others. What is your dream? What kind of show do you want to do? Or would you hope the first one that comes out is?
I think any show that talks about the human experience for me is just, you can't beat it. Any show. Really. First of all, let me just go back on your point about data and sharing data as far as streamers are concerned. This comes back also to the representation issue, right? Because maybe a lot of people aren't aware of this, but the reason many of the streamers don't show their data or share their data is because of compensation. Because streamers, especially, I don't know, Netflix or others, they work on a cost-plus model with their creators, right? So if you do well, it is what you get when you sign that deal. You don't get anything from the back end. And then for the more traditional platforms, it's actually vice versa. You actually benefit more from the back end than from the front.
Than from the front end.
But sharing data then will give you a little bit of an edge if your project does well. That you say, listen, let's come back to the negotiating table. Right? Let's look at the numbers again. Let's see what, let's look at churn. Let's understand whether my content is actually generating eyeballs for your platform, and are they keeping the eyeballs there, right? Are they increasing subscriber numbers, et cetera? So all these elements are critical when understanding where we go as an industry and what kind of content we want to be creating and what kind of content should we be creating. For me, I just love authentic stories. I don't care what genre they are. Fantasy, horror, whether it's fiction, I just like authentic stories. I like universal stories. Things that touch on our shared pain points as humans, above all else, and do it in a creative way. Squid Game, for instance, it was very disturbing to me. However, I saw that, yes, it addresses basic human...
A universal human.
Absolutely. Yeah. By the way, I went to film school with Dong, who's the creator of Squid Game.
Oh, you did?
And I don't necessarily
Did you know that he would be so warped?
I knew he was I was very concerned. I did not know that I knew that he was in development on a show. He's been in development on this show for years. And every time I asked, he said, I'm still working. And I can't get support. And then my kids actually came to me and said, we're watching this Korean show. You have to see it. I had no idea it was Dong's. Honestly, I wish I had the time to watch everything that came out. I just don't. But that said, Korean drama, usually it's not very much on my list. It's not on your radar, right?
Yeah.
Although my friends love it. I have a lot of friends that's all they watch. But I didn't see it. So Dong called me and said, did you watch my show? And I did not know it was Squid Game. I said, I'm sorry, you know that I'm not I'm not up to date with the content, and I promise you I'll take a look. He said, you have to see it. It's the #1 show on Netflix. And then I realized it was Squid Game. And the first question I asked him, I said, my dear, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you absolutely? And what can we do to help you?
Shall I fly over the?
But again, this is another story of resilience. Somebody like Dong, who for years, I think it was more than 12 years that he's been working on this show. Nobody would listen to his story. Nobody would offer him meetings. Nobody would take his meetings, and subhanallah, overnight, it's a sensation. It has really
massive sensation.
It has drawn the lines in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing what he does and what others do next, inshallah.
You know, that's an entry from Korea that's done really well. India has been outputting a lot of stuff on Netflix that have been fantastic. Actually, Sacred Games is one of them. That's great. As I said, from Germany. So hopefully, you know, I think, and you probably will be with me on that, is that the dream is to have not just a show from our region on Netflix, because that's just, you know, somewhat distribution channel. We want a hit, what Netflix call, you know, a worldwide hit to be from our region, and that takes, you know, a program like yours that you're doing, and the kind of work that companies like Imagination Abu Dhabi is doing, and Your Excellency, Sheikha Al-Zain Al-Sabah, I am honored to have moderated this session with you and welcomed you here. Thank you very much. And congratulations, and we will, myself and I'm sure a lot of other eager artists out there will be following the work of this program.
Inshallah.
And fingers crossed that you will give us the first hit,
Inshallah,
worldwide hit, inshallah.
Shukran, Akhi Rami. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Pleasure.